On this special edition of the Bluffton News, we will be talking with two people to watch in 2018 in the Lowcountry. Welcome to the Bluffton News. I'm your host, Daniela Squickero. Our first interviewee today is John Dowling. He is the representative of District 6 of the Beaufort County School Board. John, welcome to the show.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for being here. So, we've got so much to talk about today, and there's so much going on. But first, give our viewers a little bit of an understanding of who you are, what's your background, and why did you run?
Okay. I moved down to the Lowcountry in 2003. Up in Massachusetts, where I came from, I served on 3 elected terms on a school board. After that, I went to work for the Massachusetts Association of School Boards, training school boards. So it's kind of in my blood. My day job was as a manager for a large computer corporation. I became involved in the school district in December 2016 as a citizen activist. And when the vacancy opened up in June, I felt very strongly that I should run. I was very pleased to capture 63% of the vote when I did in the election in October. So here I am now after 5 months on the board.
Absolutely. So as you said, that was in October, and it's been 5 months.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about your platforms. What were those things that you ran on? What were your ideals that you brought to the table?
The main thrust of my platform was reform versus status quo. Openness, doing the business of the public in public, prioritizing budgets and conducting financial oversight over our $250 million budget, and managing the superintendent. We've made some strides. There's been some resistance, as we expected, from the status quo faction on the board, the so-called Moss majority. But we have made strides. In January, the district received subpoenas from the U.S. Attorney's Office regarding an FBI probe of the last 2 construction projects that the district undertook. We were threatened and intimidated by the district administration against divulging the existence of that probe. We were threatened with prison time and jail time. We found those threats to be groundless, as evidenced by the fact that I'm sitting here today. I didn't get in any trouble when we publicized the existence of the probe. We were unsuccessful in getting the subpoenas released to the public, but at least the county citizenry is aware now of that probe taking place. Another thing that has gone well is that we were able to mount reasonable opposition to the passage of the vote to go forward with a referendum that will be voted on April 21st. The referendum passed the school board by a slim margin of 1 vote, 6-5, which is much better than the lopsided rubber stamp vote that usually takes place. So it's a long haul. Nobody enjoys being embroiled in controversy almost all the time. But I was not elected to roll over and play dead in order to preserve a false illusion of harmony where none exists.
Exactly.
We're committed to reform. I'm working with some wonderful people on the board that are equally committed to reform. And we look forward to the November elections when we can perhaps get a majority which will enable us to deliver a board to the county that they can be proud of.
You mentioned this referendum, and this is something that a lot of people have been talking about. Can you flesh that out a little bit for us? What is that, and what's the importance?
Sure. The impetus for the referendum developed due to the fact that 2 schools in Bluffton were overcrowded, Pritchardville Elementary and River Ridge Academy. Unfortunately, a case was never really made to the board that justified a $76 million request, which is for 1 new school, K-8 school, and additions to the 2-year-old River Ridge Academy and the 2-year-old May River High School, and 3 CATE industrial program buildings to be scattered throughout the district. We felt strongly that the whole idea was conceptual. It had no details. The numbers kept changing almost on a daily basis. The final number was delivered to us minutes before we were supposed to vote on it. So lacking that detail, what we did is we bought enough portable classrooms for those 2 schools. And I might interject that there are schools in Bluffton that are under capacity. We never really got a handle on what our true capacity is and what our true classroom utilization is. So we bought portables for the 2 schools and took care of the overcrowding for the short term, 2-3 years. Now we can go make a factual, reasoned study using community input, community resources, and independent resources to find out what our true needs are. It's a very, in my view, and the view of 4 other people on the board, that it's a very risky and actually unnecessary investment on the part of the county. It's a $76 million referendum that will cost $130 million to pay back when you add in the interest, and our total planned debt for the district will finally cross the $1 billion mark. It's risky.
So you mentioned that some schools are not even to capacity necessarily, and certainly over the next several years, as Bluffton continues to grow and develop, those numbers will change and continue to change. So you'll have an opportunity then, it sounds to me, to really look at those numbers as the influx continues and get a greater feel for what's really needed in the long term. Is that right?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, a lot of what we heard during this process was anecdotal evidence. You know, you talk to a realtor and they say Bluffton's exploding. Well, it is. The question is how much of the explosion is in parents of school-aged children, or is it where I live, Sun City, and likewise communities that don't have children into the schools. So what we need to do is find a factual basis to make these decisions from, with mutually agreed to terms, definitions, and numbers.
So you mentioned reform. That was one of your big platforms, and that's very common for someone who's coming in that's not an incumbent. You see something that you see as needing to be fixed. What would you say? Would you say that the board, as it stands now, has any great strengths as opposed to weaknesses? Or do you think that there's just sort of across-the-board reform that needs to happen?
The across-the-board reform that needs to happen is that simply, well, there's 2 major areas. We have made strides in our adherence and understanding of the Freedom of Information Act. The board was very lackluster and lackadaisical in its executive session, use of executive session, and in agenda, and all the facets of openness that the Freedom of Information Act requires. We've made good strides in that. What is lacking is that we have a $250 million budget. There is no financial oversight done by the board on that $250 million budget. It's not enough to know where the money is going. It also needs constant vigilance about why is the money going where it is going. We can't have discretionary spending taking place when teachers have to dig into their own pockets to an average cost of $400 a teacher to supply classrooms. That should be a priority. The board does not involve itself in that priority setting and that type of maintenance management. The critics will call it micromanagement. I call it good financial oversight. We're supposed to be stewards of that $250 million budget, not just give a blessing to the superintendent and say, see you next year when you come back with a new budget. So that has yet to take place. I'm confident that it will eventually happen. Probably not till we get a new majority on the board, because the current majority is predispositioned to just approve whatever the superintendent asks for.
Well, John, thank you so much for sharing this information with us. Please do tell the viewers quickly, where can they go to find more information? Who can they contact?
There is information, factual information, on the district website, BeaufortCountySchools.net. There are various forums taking place throughout the county during the month of April that will be publicized. People are more than welcome to attend. And it's very, very important that people get out and vote on factual, rational decision rather than emotional heartstrings pulled. We fixed the problem of overcrowding. It does not exist at the moment, and that's what really counts, because that is what benefits the children.
Well, we look forward to seeing this board as it moves forward and seeing what happens here, and of course with the November elections coming up. Thank you very much, John, for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Coming up after the break, we will meet with our second person to watch for 2018. Stay right there.